My name's Jo. I work for Devon Wildlife Trust on the Conservation Communities project. And my project is based in an area of Devon between Great Torrington and Hatherley. And it's working with the parishes along the River Torridge. There's 11 parishes based there. And the idea is that I engage with the people who live in this area to start recording the wildlife that they see. We know this area has a great potential for lots of wildlife. But one of the things we're finding is that people don't tend to record the wildlife that they see, and it doesn't get recorded with the Records Centre. So I'm working closely with Devon Biodiversity Records Centre, and I'm encouraging people to try and send their records in of any wildlife that they see, so that we start to build up an on-the-ground record of what's here in this part of Devon. Now, the work we're doing can benefit the whole of Devon because people can join in with things like this talk today, so it's open to everybody. And if you live in another part of Devon, don't feel like you can't send your records in because we'd like to hear about those too. It's just that my focus is on those 11 parishes. So please do join us by recording any wildlife sightings and sending them into the Devon Biodiversity Records Centre at any time. That'd be great. So my project's been made available because of the Heritage Lottery. So anyone who buys lottery tickets, I'd like to say thank you because you're supporting the work that I do. And if you want to find out more about my project, then go onto the Devon Wildlife Trust website and look up conservation communities, and you should be able to read up a bit more about that. If you are in one of the 11 parishes that the project covers, you'll be able to hire one of these from me. We're going to lend these out to people. These are camera traps, so you can set them up in your garden or somewhere relatively safe, and we can record the wildlife that's actually in your garden. It's a great way of verifying what's there, learning about what's around, especially at night when we don't necessarily get out and about and see quite so much. So if anybody would like to borrow one of these and you're in the 11 parishes of the project area, then please do get in touch with me. It would be great to start getting those cameras out. So as I said, if you've got questions during Jaz's talk, please put them into the chat and we'll get to those at the end. So I'd like to say welcome to Jaz, and I'm going to unmute Jaz, if I can do that. Yeah, Jaz. Hi Jaz, thank you.
Right, so yeah, hello everyone. I'm Jasmine. I'm Wildlife Communities Officer for Devon Wildlife Trust. And Jo's asked me to come today and talk a bit about hedgehogs, which is obviously a lovely topic and something, you know, with lockdown, people are in their gardens a lot more. And I think gardens are giving people a real kind of sense of peace and comfort. So, you know, even more important than maybe it normally is. So I'm going to try and share my screen now. So excuse me whilst I sort out the tech. So here we go. So I'm just going to let Jo give me the thumbs up if you can see that okay. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so I hope you've all got your cups of tea and are settled in for our talk on hedgehogs. So a little bit about what I'm going to talk about today. So we're going to go through the hedgehog basics, some facts and figures, talk a bit about their range, their population status, think about why they're threatened, and then how we can help hedgehogs in our gardens and the wider countryside. And there'll be some time for questions at the end, obviously, if you pop them in the chat and Jo will ask them to me at the end. Okay, so here's our hedgehog, the Western European hedgehog on the left, very easily recognizable. And as conservation communities is all about sending in your records, there's no excuse for not knowing what they are. They are our only spiny mammal in the UK, and yet most people know how to identify a hedgehog. So we'll talk a bit about records later. You can see the map in the middle there. The green is where they're found. They are also found in New Zealand, where they were introduced, and they are regarded as a pest there. They do eat ground nesting bird eggs, but this is their natural range here, shown here. There are actually between 14 and 17 species of hedgehog worldwide, and that number varies depending on which taxonomist you talk to and how they split the group. I've put here 3 other hedgehogs. So we've got the Ethiopian, Algerian, and long-eared hedgehogs on the right, just to show how they do vary across the world. So hedgehogs can live well up to 10 years, but the average age is 3 years in the wild. They are part of their own family taxonomically. Their closest relatives are thought to be moles or shrews, but they do sit in their own family there, and they haven't changed much for around 15 million years, so they're quite an ancient species. They have around 4,000 to 5,000 spines, which are just modified hairs. So they're made of keratin, which is the same stuff as our hair and our fingernails. And yeah, so that's our kind of basic hedgehog facts. So moving on. Oh, there we go. So I wanted to kind of talk a bit about the cultural significance of hedgehogs, because we all love hedgehogs. But actually, they don't come up in folklore very much throughout time, but they do come up a lot in illustrations, and they have been of cultural significance across the world. So on the top left there, we've got a little hedgehog amulet from ancient Egypt, and there they. So the ancient Egyptians associated hedgehogs with rebirth. So kind of they thought that they rose from the dead, because the hedgehog species they have there, not the same as our Western European hedgehog, but one of the 2 species that are present in Egypt. When food is scarce, they will burrow down into the ground, and they will hide away until food is more abundant, when they will come back up again. And then, so the ancient Egyptians would see this and think that they had been reborn, so kind of risen from the dead. And for that reason, they would put amulets in tombs, and also or like little figurines in tombs, and wear amulets as a symbol of this. In places, so in Mongolia, there's a lot about hedgehogs being quite a bad luck. If a hedgehog enters your house, it's thought to be bad luck, because hedgehogs they walk with their heads down, and so they were thought of as untrustworthy creatures. But if you put a hedgehog skin on the top of your doorway, it's thought to protect your household from bad things. So a protector. In Europe, for a long time, hedgehogs were not liked. It was thought that hedgehogs would steal fruit. You can see here the illustration, and there's many illustrations from kind of the medieval times onwards of hedgehogs rolling and collecting fruit on their spines. So that might be apples, or also mushrooms or grapes, and they would collect them on their spines, they thought, and walk off and go into their secret storage, hide the fruit away, and gobble it all up. And it was also thought that hedgehogs stole milk from cows and also ate chicken eggs. And hedgehogs will go for a chicken egg if it's broken already, but they would not be able to break into them. So and they don't steal milk either. So there's kind of all this thinking in that time that hedgehogs were these thieves of various produce. And even in the natural history book that Pliny wrote, so he wrote it in AD 79, and it was published in 1469, I think. And it's the oldest natural history manuscript to be published. Even he wrote about it, and it's questionable as to whether he saw a lot of the things that he wrote about in that book. And obviously he hadn't actually observed hedgehogs doing this, but it just shows, that many people thought that this was the case. And it led, unfortunately, to the Vermin Act in 1566, which put a bounty on hedgehog heads. So the British Parliament and also the church would pay a small amount of money per hedgehog that was killed. And it's estimated that between 1600 and 1800, around 500,000 hedgehogs were killed as part of this Vermin Act, which is obviously a really significant number. And yet it really wasn't until very recently that hedgehogs have become a much more positive, people think of hedgehogs much more positively now. And a real kind of turning point was the publishing of the Tale of Mrs. Tiggywinkle by Beatrix Potter in 1905. And she was a real wildlife conservationist, but as a woman at the time, her way of putting these stories across was through children's stories. And yeah, this book in 1905 kind of was the real turning point, and probably one of the reasons why hedgehogs are so loved today and are now voted Britain's favorite mammal often in polls, and we all want them in our gardens today. Okay, so kind of back to the science now. So I wanted to talk a little bit about diet. So hedgehogs' diet changes throughout the year. It's in the spring, they'll be more reliant on things like leather jacket larvae. And then, yeah, that kind of changes as and when different prey is abundant. You can see on this graph here our kind of most popular things that are most important for hedgehogs are beetles, earwigs, caterpillars, millipedes, and worms. But they are opportunists, so they will eat lots of other things. They will go for eggs, small bird eggs, and even it's been reported hedgehogs eating snakes. Yeah, so they will kind of go for like all different sorts of things. And slugs aren't on this list, but they are on some other lists. So it does kind of vary depending on the study. Most of these studies are based on dead hedgehog stomach contents. And so this is just one. And I always think, if you had the option between a nice crunchy beetle and a slimy slug, you'd probably go for the beetle, wouldn't you? But they are still very important for helping our gardens out with slug control. A bit about the habits. I can't see the top of my screen. I'm hoping that you all can. So I'm sorry about that if you can't see the titles. But so this slide is about kind of their general behavior. So we probably all know that hedgehogs are nocturnal. They come out at night. They're solitary, although they will coexist if kind of put together in, for example, a rescue centre. They're non-territorial, so you won't find hedgehogs fighting over territory, but you might see them fighting over mates and maybe even food. They can climb and they can swim, they can run, and they actually have quite long legs. If you look on the top left there, it's quite surprising when they lift up their bodies up. They can actually run at speeds of up to 7 kilometers an hour. So pretty quick when they want to be. Breeding starts at 2 years old, and breeding starts in May with quite noisy courtship. So the male will find a female and circle her and make a lot of kind of snuffling noises. And the commotion can then draw in rival males, which may then come in and fight. So there could be some headbutting and chasing. And you're likely to hear this because it's pretty noisy. If you've got hedgehogs in your garden, you're likely to hear this in May. And then the hoglets are born in June. And litter size is generally around 4 to 5 hoglets. Although, unfortunately, around 2/3 of hoglets won't make it through their first year. But hopefully all of the hoglets leave the nest within 3 to 4 weeks, and they'll go and scavenge with their mother, and then they'll become independent at 5 to 6 weeks. And you can see here, there's a nice diagram from Hedgehog Street, and it just shows the life cycle there throughout the year. And you can see the birth of hoglets can actually go on till late summer, kind of early autumn. It is those later those later hoglets will be the second brood. So a lot of scientists say really that second broods are really unlikely to survive because they don't have enough time to feed up before hibernation. And that's when you get what we call autumn orphans. And they're the ones that you might find potentially at this time of year that might need a bit of a helping hand. And we've got a slide at the end to just talk a little bit about that and how to deal with that if you do see really small hedgehogs out now. So hibernation, so it's that time of year. I've put here that hedgehogs hibernate between October and March, but that really does vary depending on the weather and also where you live in the country. It also depends on the hedgehog. So a big male that's all ready for hibernation could potentially go into hibernation in September if it's cold enough, whereas females tend to go into hibernation a bit later because they need a bit more time to feed up after having their young. So when they do go into hibernation, they drop their body temperatures to around the same temperature as the surrounding air, and their metabolic rate really drops. So all kind of normal activity stops, and they live off their fat supplies that they've built up from the summer. They don't necessarily have a constant hibernation throughout the whole winter. They are likely to move nest. So they could move nest a couple of times. It's also been seen for hedgehogs to actually swap nests. And also if it's mild, they can get up and have a little forage around for food. That's fine, but ideally that wouldn't happen very often, because if it's very mild and they do wake up, it's much harder to find their prey in the winter than it is in the summer. So ideally you kind of want it quite a cold winter, so they're going to stay in hibernation and not wake up too often, because that can really deplete those fat stores if it does happen too frequently. Nests. So I think I might have mentioned nests a couple of times now. There's actually 3 different types of nest. So there's day nests. So that's when the hedgehogs are active, so the spring, summer and early autumn. And these are going to be just places that they stay during the day to hide away and have a sleep. Probably just a pile of leaves or even long grass, a patch of nettles. It doesn't, it's quite flimsy. It doesn't have to be anything particularly sturdy. Maternity nests are where they have their young. So this has got to have a bit more protection. The females are likely to try and find somewhere, for example, under brambles, where they're going to have a bit more kind of protection and be safe with their young. And then there's hibernation nests, which are the biggest ones. They take 1 to 4 days to build. They can be up to 60 centimeters in diameter, and they're really, really tightly packed, tightly woven, lots of leaves and long grass. And because they want it to be really, really well insulated. And there was actually a study by Pat Morris in London, and he showed that the inside of the hibernation nests, or hibernacula, stay between 1 and 5 degrees Celsius, even when ambient temperatures varied between, I've lost the side of my screen, but I think it's -8, and 10 degrees Celsius. So that really shows just how well insulated these nests are. And hibernation nests need to be somewhere really quite sheltered. So under hedgerows, in brambles, or even, places like behind your shed or next to a wall, somewhere that's gonna, provide a bit of wind shelter. I think someone might not have their microphone muted. So if you could all just have a little check on your bottom left of your screen and just make sure that you've got the mute button highlighted, just because otherwise it might get a bit confusing. So habitat, so as I said, brambles are the most popular hibernation nest site. So brambles are brilliant. Brambles, scrub, hedgerow. There you're like hedgehog heaven. And then you also need things like long grass and short grass for foraging, and also those day nests in the long grass. Hedgehogs also need leaf litter to make those hibernation nests, and also to find prey. And it really, you know, our urban areas, towns and villages and cities are brilliant for hedgehogs because they have all these things. The only thing that stops them sometimes using these areas is connectivity. So hedgehogs need to be able to move throughout the landscape. But otherwise, our urban areas can be really brilliant for hedgehogs. So I've got here limiting factors to presence. So not enough hibernation or nest options. So that's our brambles and hedgerows, or behind the shed. You know, this is where it's important to, if you can leave a little wild patch in your garden, makes a massive difference. They need the right leaf size. So hedgehogs are a bit fussy. Things like willow leaves are too small. Sycamore leaves are too big. So they need a nice variety of medium size, ideally native leaves to make their nests. And they need an available structure for building a nest underneath, like I've just spoken about. And I mentioned connectivity just then. So it was once thought that hedgehogs would use kind of 1 or 2 gardens, and that would be them. But in the 80s, there was a study, and you can find the results of this study and this map on the British Hedgehog Preservation Society website. And they radio tracked hedgehogs. And this is just one hedgehog, male 106, that was radio tracked over 12 nights. And this hedgehog roamed this whole 18-hole golf course, which is 40 hectares, roamed across it, and it also used gardens. You can see it's kind of gone in and out of gardens as well for supplementary feeding. And it really kind of completely changed the way that we saw hedgehog behavior. And it's now known that hedgehogs will travel on average 2 kilometers a night, and the males can travel up to 3 kilometers in the breeding season in search of a mate. So it really does just show, you know, how important it is that hedgehogs can move about and find all that food, nesting opportunities and mates throughout the landscape, whether that be in the city or in the countryside. I wanted to talk a bit about population status. So if you want to find out more, the State of Britain's Hedgehogs report by the British Hedgehog Preservation Society and the People's Trust for Endangered Species is a really good place to go. It's quite a short document and it's really informative. The main thing that came out of this was they stated that since the year 2000, rural populations have declined by at least a half, and urban populations have declined by up to a third. So that's pretty stark. It's really difficult to estimate hedgehog numbers because they're nocturnal and they're solitary. We're not really sure exactly how many hedgehogs there are in the UK. In 1995, there was a study that people put as, you know, kind of the first reliable population study, and they put the hedgehog population at 1.5 million, and you can see that's, you know, really declined since then. And they did this through garden surveys and also roadkill surveys. So it just all kind of like highlights the importance of making sure you do send in your hedgehog sightings. So if you see a hedgehog in your garden, make sure you do record it. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But if you go to the Hedgehog Street Big Hedgehog map, that's a great place to input your data. And Devon Biodiversity Record Centre do get those results. So that's a good place, or directly to Devon Biodiversity Record Centre. And yeah, always make sure you do pop in your records, because it makes a really big difference the next time they do try and estimate this population. So what's causing this decline? So the top right picture is just to represent the main thing, habitat fragmentation. So the breaking up of habitats, and hedgehogs not being able to move through those lovely corridors, not being able to have enough habitat to thrive. So this could be through, in the countryside, things like removal of hedgerows and also much larger field sizes. Agricultural intensification, so earthworms and things like slugs are, a big part of the hedgehog diet, and becoming less and less frequent in agricultural soils. Loss of hedgerows, so that's connectivity, corridors that the hedgehogs can move through, but also, as we know now, nesting sites, and also great places for prey opportunities. So yeah, prey availability. And here I just wanted to mention our Action for Insects campaign. So this is a fairly new campaign by Devon Wildlife Trust, and it's all about increasing and helping insects in your home gardens and community areas. And if you go onto the Devon Wildlife Trust website, you can sign up to receive a guide, either a community guide or an individual guide to help insects. There's loads of ideas about what you can do, and I really would encourage everybody to have a look at that and get involved, because it's, there's easy things, and then there's like more advanced things, and it's something everyone can make a real massive difference to. And if we increase our insect population, we help our hedgehogs and all other wildlife and ourselves too. So in kind of more built up areas, we've got other causes of decline. So roadkill, well, obviously rural and urban areas. So the estimates of hedgehogs that die on the road each year vary massively, but it's said around 100,000 hedgehogs die on the road each year, which is not a sustainable number looking at the overall population. Impermeable boundaries is another big one. So fences and walls, if hedgehogs can't get through them, means that area is just not available to them at all. Also things like paved over front gardens, for example. It's just going to mean that hedgehogs aren't going to be able to move through or over them, and represent an impermeable boundary. Strimming and flailing. So hedgehogs don't have a flight reflex. As we all know, if hedgehogs are threatened, they roll up into a ball, and their spines are their protection. So they have no chance against a strimmer. So always make sure you check for hedgehogs if you're going to strim your hedge. And we're addicted to tidiness. So, hedgehogs need that nice scrubby area at the back of your garden, or nice kind of wilder hedgerow, but we like neat box hedges and short grass. So if you can kind of build in these less tidy areas in your community, it's gonna really help. And the last thing is just badgers I wanted to mention. So badgers are the main UK predator of hedgehogs. They're the only animal we have in the UK that is strong enough to unfurl a hedgehog. But the hedgehog decline is the same whether you're looking at an area of the country that has a high population of badgers or a low population of badgers. So it's not thought to be kind of an important cause of hedgehog decline. So it really is impermeable boundaries and habitat fragmentation and loss of prey that are the main causes of hedgehog decline. And Devon Wildlife Trust would not be looking to help one species by controlling another. So although badgers are a predator of hedgehogs, it's not a big cause of the decline. They are actually also a competitor. So hedgehogs and badgers have a lot of the same prey. So earthworms are a big part of both of their diets. So that's one thing to consider as well, that the more we fragment and degrade hedgehog habitats, the more vulnerable they are to then competition from other mammals. So just kind of really highlights the real reasons that we need to worry about. And how can you help? So that's what, that's what's happening. But actually, hedgehogs are something that we can really all help, and it's fairly easy to do. So let's have a look. The first thing to do is to assess your hedgehog safety in your garden or your community space. So go out and do a bit of an audit. Things like drains and ditches are going to be a hazard to hedgehogs. So you want a ramp out of them, ideally, or for them to be covered over. Netting can be a real issue. Make sure that your netting, if you've got to use it, ideally don't use it, but sometimes you have to. Make sure that it's tight and upright and not loose, and check it regularly. Kind of leads on as well to litter. So litter can be a real issue to hedgehogs. Make sure you do a litter pick. Don't leave loose plastics in your garden, or even things like plastic cups and like 6-pack beer holders can tangle hedgehogs. So any litter picking is always a good thing for all wildlife. Ponds are absolutely brilliant for hedgehogs and all wildlife. One of the best things you can do in your garden is to make a pond. But if it's got steep sides and the hedgehog goes in and then can't get out again, it's gonna be a massive hazard. So hedgehogs are really good swimmers, but if they get in and they run out of energy and they can't get out, then they will die. If you've got a steep-sided pond, pop in a ramp, kind of shallow ramp, or ideally try and make those sides more sloping so that hedgehogs can get in and have a drink and come back out again. And that's going to be one of the best things you can do for wildlife. Bonfires. So it's not bonfire night anymore, but you still might be making a bonfire. Bonfires look like really nice hibernation spots to a hedgehog. So make sure you ideally make the bonfire on the day that you're going to light it. If you can't do that, move the whole pile on the day to disturb any hedgehog, and hopefully it all will walk off, or fence it off. And even if you do all of that, one good thing to do is to light it just from one side, so that if a hedgehog is still in there, which we hope it really isn't, it potentially can climb out the other end. And as we mentioned before, make sure you check for hedgehogs before you strim, because hedgehog strimmer accidents are horrendous, so we don't want any of that. So normally here we would have a slide on trying to encourage people not to use slug pellets in their garden. But very recently, there's been the news that outdoor use of slug pellets containing metaldehyde is to be banned, which is brilliant news. So it's going to be banned. The use of it is going to be banned from the end of March 2022. And so it isn't actually going to be able to be sold from the end of March 2021. But there's a 1-year grace period for people to use up their supplies. We would not recommend that you did use up your supply. We recommend you dispose of it, and make sure you don't put it in your normal bin. You should take it to a local authority waste centre and dispose of it there. So yeah, this is really brilliant news for our hedgehogs and other wildlife. We're really pleased about this announcement. But what do you do if you can't use your slug pellets? I know they're popular on allotments, and if you've grown your lettuce from seed and then a slug comes along and eats it all, then it's pretty frustrating. So I thought I'd put in a slide about what you can do instead of slug pellets. So the best thing you can do is to encourage predators. So obviously hedgehogs, but also birds and frogs. And if you rely on slug pellets and other pesticides, it completely eliminates all of the prey items for these animals. So you won't then get hedgehogs and birds and things in your gardens. So you become then reliant on the pesticide. So having a much more healthy, natural balance in your garden is actually going to be much better longer term and much more sustainable. You can also do things like go out at night with a torch and collect up your slugs and dispose of them. Make sure you don't water in the evening. Slugs really like moisture, and so they're gonna, really enjoy being out and about if you've just watered your garden in the evening. So make sure you do it in the morning. You can also protect kind of more vulnerable plants, either through something like copper tape or a copper ring. Or there's an example here where someone's just, I think, chopped up a plastic bottle and placed it over the plant. There's a really great website I found that someone had tested lots of different barriers with snails, and he reckoned that the most effective barrier was actually brambles. So you could, if you had something really, you really didn't want to get eaten, give it a go, like chop up some brambles and place it around the plant, and that might help too. And we've got beer traps here, which is kind of traditional way of getting rid of slugs. If you're going to use a beer trap, just make sure that it's placed a little bit above ground level, so that beetles and the like won't fall in. And you also might want to put a little lid over the top to stop things falling in, maybe a bit kind of elevate it up a bit, and that will help just collect the slugs. If anybody's got any other ideas about this, then do feel free to kind of add them into the chat. We can suggest them at the end. Giving hedgehogs a door. So the most important thing probably should be number one in things you can do to help hedgehogs, because if your garden is brilliant for hedgehogs in every single way, but they can't get in, then they won't benefit. So make sure you've got a hole in your fence or wall. It only needs to be 13 centimeters by 13 centimeters, and that will kind of be too small for other wildlife. Too small for kind of thing like pets to get in and out of, but big enough for our hedgehogs. Make sure that you don't put a hole into a fence that leads to a road, because that's going to be a real hazard for hedgehogs. So ideally into another garden or into a green space or a pathway. And yeah, without that, then you're not going to get hedgehogs in your garden. So you can also, if you can't make a hole through, you could always tunnel under. So that's what we've got in our garden. We've got a little tunnel that goes underneath the fence, and we've had a hedgehog that comes and goes through it. So yeah, they're not too fussy on that. You might want to put some food out to supplement their diet. It's been shown that hedgehogs don't rely on food that's put out by humans. It's only ever a supplement, so they won't become reliant on it, which is good. Probably all know by now that milk and bread are big no-nos. So hedgehogs are lactose intolerant, so milk will make their tummy really bad. Definitely don't want to put milk out. The only liquid they need is water. Bread is going to fill them up, but has no nutritional value. So again, don't want to put bread out. We used to think that mealworms were good, but actually it's been shown that mealworms can cause metabolic bone disease. So don't put that out either. The only things you want to put out for hedgehogs are wet meaty cat and dog food, or biscuits, cat and dog biscuits. And especially if you put biscuits out, it's especially important to put water out as well. And you might want to make a bit of a feeding station if you don't want to attract the local cats. And an example here at the bottom just shows a really simple plastic tub, and you've got your 13 by 13 centimeter hole at one end and your food at the other end, and the hedgehog can go in there, but a cat isn't going to be able to reach in and pull it out. And there's a lid on the top and a brick just to stop anything from opening it up. And it also stops it getting wet in the rain. So that's quite handy too. Oh, and you can actually also get hedgehog specific food from pet food stores. So that's another option too. But the best thing you can do is increase the natural food supply in your garden. So that could be through things like log piles, which are going to be great for beetles, which are important for hedgehogs. A nettle patch, if you can dedicate a little bit of your garden to a nettle patch, is going to be brilliant because many butterflies rely on nettles as their main food source for their caterpillars. It's got to be in a sunny position, so not just a behind your shed patch of nettles. In a nice sunny position, you're going to get loads of butterflies, loads of caterpillars, and therefore going to help your hedgehogs. And nettles are a good summer nesting site as well. And the other thing we've got here is, so if you leave your herbaceous perennials over winter, instead of chopping them back in the autumn, if you leave them over the winter, then their hollow stems are going to be good for overwintering insects, which again just will increase the insect population of your garden, which is a great food source for hedgehogs. Ponds again are going to have loads of wildlife, loads of insects, and leaf piles as well is going to be good for insects, but also provide that nesting material. And we've got another log pile here, and someone's made this so that it's got a hole in it for the hedgehog to go into. So maybe a great little spot for hibernating as well. And then the wider landscape, we want better connectivity, better better wildlife-rich meadows, perfectly managed hedgerow, like well-managed hedgerows for wildlife, and also things like cattle grids can be a real hazard for hedgehogs. So having ramps in and out of ditches and also cattle grids is really important too. So you've done all of that, and you're wondering, are there hedgehogs in my garden? So what to look for? The easiest thing to look for is their poo, and you can identify it fairly easily because it's black and shiny. So shiny from the beetle wing cases, and you can see a picture there. So that's what to look out for. You could also have a go with a footprint tunnel. So the idea of this is that you have an ink pad at one end and food at the other, and the hedgehog walks across the ink pad and then walks across the paper trying to get to the food, and leaves footprints, and then you can identify the footprints and know if you've got a hedgehog in your garden. You might also potentially get a camera trap. So if you're in Joe's Conservation Communities project area, you can now borrow a camera trap, a motion detector camera trap. But otherwise, you can buy them, and yeah, you never know, you might get a hedgehog on screen. Or like me, you might have a security camera that you rig up at the back of your shed. And this is a hedgehog in our garden from a couple of weeks ago now. I think it might have gone into hibernation because we haven't seen it in a few days. But we were so pleased, we've made our little tunnel under the fence. And here's our hedgehog, looking quite plump, I think, and probably ready for hibernation. So off he or she goes over the wall. It's quite a little wild area back there, lots of nice leaves and brambles. So yeah, it's a brilliant thing to be able to say, you've got a hedgehog in your garden. You can now also sign up to become a hedgehog champion with Devon Wildlife Trust. So the idea of this is that you sign up and you get a pack in the post. You get some posters which have some information about how to help hedgehogs that you can put up in your local community. You get 10 leaflets and 10 postcards with more information and the size of the hole that you need. And you can give those out to your neighbours and hopefully make a hedgehog highway throughout, all of your street, all of your neighbourhood. And you also get a fact sheet and a welcome letter. So yeah, it's free and it's a brilliant thing to sign up to. If you go onto the Devon Wildlife Trust website, you can find it, or Google Help a Hog Devon, and I think it comes up. And just to say again, if you've done all of this and you've seen a hedgehog in your garden, make sure you do send in your records to Devon Biodiversity Record Centre or Hedgehog Street's Big Hedgehog Map. And as it's kind of late autumn, or early winter now, I wanted to put in something about if you do see a hedgehog out and about. So the first thing to say is that no specific weight will guarantee survival throughout winter, but those hibernating at less than 450 grams are unlikely to survive. So you should normally rescue a hedgehog at weights of less than 450 grams between October and February. So if you do see a really small hedgehog now, it does need some help. So what you need to do is put on some gardening gloves, collect up the hedgehog, pop it in a cardboard box with tool sides, pop a fleece in there that it can hide under, and also a hot water bottle like wrapped in a towel. Just make sure the hedgehog can get on and off the hot water bottle as it needs, and make sure you keep it hot and it doesn't get cold. Put in some food and water as well, and ring your local rehabilitation centre who can give you some advice. If you don't know the number, you can ring the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, and the telephone number is there. They'll give you some advice and they'll pass you on to your local rehabilitator or rescue centre. And it just says there, yeah, rescue at 500 grams or more is unnecessary based on weight alone. So it says that just because if a hedgehog is out in the daytime, then it's also going to need a bit of help at this time of year, especially if it looks a bit kind of dizzy or disorientated, then that hedgehog needs a hand as well. Just a thing to remember is earlier in the year, in the summertime, if you see a hedgehog out in the daytime, it's probably okay. Well, it might be okay. So often females will come out in the day to have a kind of extra feed, have a break from the nest. So if they are looking okay and looking like they're kind of going and doing something and then, you know, they're kind of on a mission, then they're most likely completely fine. It's only if a hedgehog was, say, sunbathing that you might then be concerned in the summer. But yeah, at this time of year, if a hedgehog is out in the daytime, and especially if it's small, then yeah, he's going to need a bit of help. And that's it for my presentation.